Let's get real for a second. Betrayal cuts like a knife, whether it's a lie, an affair, a broken promise, or a secret that came to light. It doesn't just damage the relationship, it rewrites the entire story you thought you were living. And here's the truth: rebuilding trust after betrayal is not about going back to normal. Normal is gone. It's about creating a new normal, one built with brutal honesty, consistent action, and accountability. I want you to hear me clearly. Trust isn't rebuilt by words. It's rebuilt by behavior day in and day out. Saying, "I'm sorry," is the down payment. Living, "I'm sorry," is the mortgage. And if you think this is going to be quick or easy, you're lying to yourself. Trust can take years to build and seconds to break. If you're serious about rebuilding, it's going to require radical transparency, emotional grit, and a willingness to get uncomfortable. This sounds simple, but it's one of the most misunderstood truths when it comes to repairing relationships after betrayal. Too often, people lean on words like, "I'm sorry," "I promise it won't happen again," or "please just believe me." While those words may be important as an opening step, they don't carry weight if the behavior that follows doesn't align with them. Think of trust like a bank account. Every betrayal is a withdrawal, sometimes a devastating one that empties the account entirely. Words are like IOUs written on paper. They acknowledge the debt, but they don't refill the account. Only actions, repeated and consistent, make deposits back into that account over time. When someone has been betrayed, their world feels destabilized. What they thought was secure and reliable suddenly feels shaky and unpredictable. In that moment, the betrayed person doesn't want poetry or long apologies. They want proof. Proof comes in the form of behavior that is steady, predictable, and reliable enough to gradually convince them that safety can be restored. If a partner promises never to lie again, the betrayed partner will not measure the promise by the sound of the words, but by whether day after day truth replaces deception. Consistency means showing up the same way, especially when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. One apology doesn't rebuild trust, but 100 moments of honesty, accountability, and follow through start to shift the foundation. It's helpful to compare this process to building muscle. You can't go to the gym once, lift weights, and declare yourself strong. You have to keep showing up rep after rep, workout after workout, week after week. Similarly, trust is not restored with a grand gesture or a single "I've changed" moment. It's rebuilt in the everyday grind of choices. Choosing honesty when it's easier to hide. Choosing openness when it feels vulnerable. Choosing to follow through on commitments, even the small ones, because the small ones prove reliability. A broken promise to pick up milk from the store may not seem like betrayal on its own, but when someone is trying to rebuild trust, even these small lapses reinforce doubt. Consistency in the little things creates credibility for the big things. Another layer to understand is that behavior must match words not just occasionally, but relentlessly. If you say you'll be home by 7, you need to be home by 7 or clearly communicate why you won't. If you say you're committed to therapy, you need to attend sessions regularly, not just once when you feel guilty. Every time your actions match your words, you deposit into that trust account. Every time they don't, you risk reinforcing suspicion. Inconsistency is gasoline on the fire of betrayal. People often underestimate how much the betrayed person's nervous system is on high alert, scanning for signs of danger. When behavior is inconsistent, it confirms their fears that nothing has truly changed. There's also a psychological element here that can't be ignored. Humans rely on patterns to feel safe. When betrayal happens, the pattern is broken. The betrayed person feels like the ground beneath them isn't solid anymore. To rebuild, the betrayer has to create a new, predictable pattern of trustworthy behavior. Over time, the betrayed person's brain begins to relax as it recognizes the new pattern. That's why consistency is so critical. It literally rewires the other person's sense of safety. Without it, the betrayed person remains stuck in hypervigilance, unable to trust even if they want to. It's also important to highlight that consistency doesn't mean perfection. Everyone slips up at times, but the difference is in how those slips are handled. If someone forgets a small promise and immediately takes ownership, apologizes without excuses, and corrects it, that still builds trust. Why? Because it shows accountability. It shows that even when mistakes happen, they won't be hidden, minimized, or denied. That kind of responsible follow-through actually strengthens trust more than someone who pretends to be flawless but secretly hides mistakes. Consistency is about honesty, not about never failing. For the betrayed person, it's vital to look at behavior as the measuring stick, not words. That means resisting the temptation to accept promises at face value when they're not backed up by consistent follow-through. Too often, betrayed individuals cling to words because they desperately want to believe them. But the real evidence lies in what someone does repeatedly. The wisest stance is believe patterns, not promises. If the pattern of behavior is changing, trust can be rebuilt. If it's just words with no behavioral change, you're setting yourself up for more disappointment. Finally, consistency requires patience. Just as a muscle doesn't grow overnight, trust doesn't rebuild quickly. It takes months and sometimes years of steady, reliable behavior before the betrayed person feels secure again. The one who broke the trust must accept that their words will not carry the same weight they once did, and that they must earn back credibility one action at a time. This can be humbling, even frustrating, but it's the only path forward if they stick with it. If they prioritize consistency over empty promises, they give the relationship the best possible chance of healing. When trust has been broken, the betrayed person no longer has the luxury of assuming honesty, reliability, or safety. What was once automatic is now shattered, and the only way to begin piecing it back together is by shining light into every shadow. Transparency becomes the new standard, not as a punishment, but as a necessity for rebuilding a foundation of trust. Without it, every conversation, every absence, and every unexplained detail can become fuel for suspicion. The reality is that when betrayal has happened, secrecy is no longer a right. It's a privilege that must be earned back through consistent honesty and openness. Transparency means nothing is left in the dark. This can look like sharing passwords, locations, or details of schedules. It might include answering hard questions without deflecting, providing receipts when necessary, or being clear about intentions before taking action. Some people argue that this feels controlling, but in the aftermath of betrayal, it isn't about control, it's about reassurance. The betrayed person's sense of security has been ruptured. Their mind is constantly filling in gaps with worst-case scenarios. Radical openness provides a bridge from fear to stability. It gives the injured person the data they need to rebuild confidence in the relationship. One of the most dangerous mistakes a betrayer can make is clinging to old ideas of privacy too soon. They say things like, "I've already apologized, you need to trust me again," or "I deserve my personal space." The truth is, after betrayal, you don't get to demand privacy while also expecting trust to magically return. Privacy is earned back over time through demonstrated honesty, not demanded as a right while wounds are still raw. If you're serious about rebuilding, you have to be willing to open the books completely. That means no hidden accounts, no secret conversations, no unexplained disappearances. Anything that looks like a secret will be interpreted as proof that nothing has changed. Transparency also requires emotional openness, not just logistical openness. It's not enough to say where you are or what you're doing. You also need to share what you're feeling, what you're struggling with, and what temptations or challenges you're facing. If you try to handle those struggles in silence, it leaves your partner guessing, and guesses almost always spiral towards suspicion. But if you admit, "I'm having a hard time today," or "I felt tempted in this situation, but here's how I handled it," you're not showing weakness, you're showing integrity. That kind of disclosure builds deeper trust than pretending to be invincible. Another element of transparency is proactive honesty. Too often, someone who has betrayed will only tell the truth when asked directly. That keeps the betrayed person stuck in detective mode, always having to interrogate to get answers. True transparency means volunteering information before being asked. It means saying, "I'm going to meet with a friend at this time, and here's who it is," instead of waiting for suspicion to bring the question. Voluntary honesty demonstrates that you're not just avoiding lies, you're actively committed to openness. That's a huge difference in rebuilding trust. Of course, transparency isn't meant to be a lifelong sentence. The goal isn't to live forever under constant surveillance, but to use radical openness as a healing process. Over time, as trust slowly rebuilds, the betrayed person will naturally feel less need to monitor every detail. But in the critical phase after betrayal, transparency is the only antidote to suspicion. It's the scaffolding that holds the relationship together while the foundation is repaired. Eventually, when safety is reestablished, transparency can evolve into a healthy balance of trust and independence. But skipping it altogether almost guarantees the relationship won't recover. It's important to note that transparency must be consistent, not selective. You don't get to choose what areas you're open about and which you're not. If you're transparent in one area but secretive in another, the secrecy cancels out the honesty. The betrayed person's mind will assume that the hidden part is where the betrayal continues. For example, if you share your phone but not your finances, or your daily schedule but not your friendships, that gap becomes a breeding ground for suspicion. Consistency across all areas of life is what makes transparency effective. Transparency also applies to future expectations. When new boundaries or agreements are made, they need to be explicit and clear. If you agree not to contact certain people, don't leave room for ambiguity. If you agree to check in during trips, don't make excuses when it feels inconvenient. Every time you sidestep the agreements, you confirm the fear that betrayal is still present. On the other hand, every time you honor those agreements without being reminded, you reinforce the sense that trust can return. For the betrayed person, it's important to recognize that asking for transparency isn't about being needy or controlling. It's about protecting your heart while you decide whether the relationship is safe again. Demanding openness isn't weakness, it's strength. It's saying, if you want back into my life, you need to prove through openness that you deserve the privilege of my trust. This mindset shifts the power dynamic back toward balance, ensuring that healing isn't just dependent on empty apologies, but on measurable action. At its core, transparency is about rebuilding credibility. Without it, trust is just wishful thinking. With it, trust becomes a realistic possibility. Words can soothe, gestures can impress, but only full, consistent transparency can calm the fear that betrayal created. It may feel exhausting at first, but it's the only bridge strong enough to carry two people from suspicion to safety, from brokenness to healing. If you're serious about rebuilding trust, transparency isn't optional, it's the price of admission. After betrayal, the old rules of the relationship no longer hold the same weight. Whatever assumptions, unspoken understandings, or traditional expectations you had before have already been shattered. Betrayal changes the landscape, and pretending you can go back to how it used to be is not only unrealistic, but also dangerous. Healing requires a reset, and that reset comes from sitting down together and deliberately crafting new agreements that make both people feel safe, respected, and valued. Without this process, the relationship runs on shaky ground where one partner hopes for change, but the other hasn't fully committed to a new standard. New agreements are not the same as vague promises. A promise like, "I won't hurt you again," sounds good but has no practical meaning. Agreements are concrete, specific, and measurable. They turn intentions into clear commitments. For example, instead of saying, "I'll be more open," a new agreement could be, "If I feel tempted to hide something, I will bring it up within 24 hours instead of burying it." Instead of, "I'll respect your feelings," the agreement might be, "When you express your concerns, I will listen without interrupting and repeat back what I heard to make sure I understood." These agreements set the stage for accountability because both partners know exactly what is expected. Creating new agreements is also about acknowledging that the betrayal exposed weak spots in the old foundation. Maybe the couple never clearly discussed boundaries around opposite sex friendships, financial transparency, or how much personal space is acceptable. Maybe they assumed loyalty without defining what loyalty meant in practice. Betrayal forces these topics onto the table. Rather than avoiding them, the couple has to confront them head on and design a new system that prevents those weak spots from becoming cracks again. Another critical part of making new agreements is ensuring they are mutual. Rebuilding trust is not just about the betrayer doing all the work, even though they bear the burden of proving themselves again. Both partners must participate in shaping what the new relationship will look like. For example, the betrayed partner may ask for openness about certain areas of life, while the betrayer may ask for patience as they work to earn back trust. If the agreements only serve one person's needs, resentment builds. When agreements are crafted together, they create a sense of teamwork and shared ownership in the healing process. It's also vital to write these agreements down or say them aloud in a way that feels official. Too many couples talk vaguely about what they'll do differently but never cement it. Writing them down or even making a spoken contract gives the agreements weight. It signals that both people are taking them seriously. Later, if one partner feels the other is slipping, they can point to the agreement and say, "We both committed to this. What happened?" That shifts the conversation from accusation to accountability. New agreements should also include how to handle conflict and future mistakes. Betrayal creates a fragile environment where any small misstep can reopen wounds. By creating agreements about how to deal with conflict, such as taking a break when tempers rise or agreeing to address issues within 24 hours instead of letting them fester, the couple builds a roadmap for navigating challenges without slipping back into destructive patterns. Planning for imperfection actually strengthens the relationship because it sets realistic expectations. Another benefit of new agreements is that they help define boundaries in clear terms. Boundaries are not punishments. They are guidelines for what is and isn't acceptable. For example, if betrayal involved dishonesty, a boundary might be, "We agree to tell each other when we communicate with someone from our past, so there are no surprises." If betrayal involved money, the boundary could be, "We agree to consult each other before making purchases above a certain amount." These agreements create structure, and structure creates safety. One of the biggest mistakes couples make is assuming forgiveness alone will carry them forward. Forgiveness is a choice, but without new agreements, the same environment that allowed the betrayal to occur still exists. Forgiveness without change is like putting a new roof on a house with a crumbling foundation. It may look better for a while, but the structural issues remain. Agreements are the tools that rebuild the foundation. They show that both people are invested in not only healing the wound, but preventing it from happening again. Of course, making agreements is not a one-time event. As the relationship evolves, the agreements may need to be revisited and updated. What feels necessary in the raw aftermath of betrayal may soften over time as trust grows again. For example, the betrayed partner may initially want daily check-ins, but after months of consistent honesty, that agreement may shift to weekly or only as needed. The key is flexibility. Agreements should grow with the relationship, not become rigid chains that stifle it. Finally, creating new agreements is about empowerment. Betrayal often leaves the betrayed partner feeling powerless, like decisions were made behind their back and control was stolen from them. Sitting down together and deliberately shaping new rules restores a sense of agency. It says, "We are choosing to design our relationship, not just letting it happen to us. This empowers both partners to move forward with clarity, accountability, and a shared vision for the future. In the end, betrayal doesn't have to mean the end of a relationship, but it always means the end of the old relationship. Something new must take its place. That something new is built not on wishful thinking or empty promises, but on clear, specific, and mutual agreements that both people commit to living out. When agreements are created thoughtfully and honored consistently, they don't just patch the relationship, they transform it into something stronger than it was before. After betrayal, many people fall into the trap of thinking time itself will repair the damage. They assume that if they wait long enough, the anger will fade, the wounds will close, and the relationship will somehow reset to normal. But time by itself doesn't heal betrayal. If anything, time without action deepens resentment, cements mistrust, and allows distance to grow. Healing after betrayal demands deliberate choices, consistent behavior, and intentional effort from both partners. Action is the medicine. Time is just the container in which the medicine works. Without action, time is empty. When betrayal happens, it shatters trust, safety, and emotional security. The betrayed partner feels like the ground has been pulled out from under them, and the betrayer often feels guilt, shame, and fear. These emotions do not resolve themselves by simply waiting. In fact, ignoring them or hoping they fade with time usually makes things worse. Pain that is not addressed doesn't disappear, it festers. Silence turns into distance, unspoken questions turn into assumptions, and unexpressed anger turns into bitterness. The idea that things will get better with time is comforting but misleading. Things only get better when there's work being done to make them better. Action begins with taking responsibility. The betrayer must acknowledge the hurt they caused without excuses or minimizing. This acknowledgement can't be a one-time apology. It must be demonstrated repeatedly through accountability, transparency, and changed behavior. The betrayed partner also has to take action by voicing their needs, setting boundaries, and being honest about their pain. Action means both people are actively participating in rebuilding, not passively waiting for feelings to change. A major part of action and healing is communication. Real conversations about what happened, why it happened, and what needs to change must take place. These conversations are often uncomfortable, emotional, and difficult, but avoiding them leaves the wound untreated. Honest dialogue provides clarity, reduces assumptions, and creates a shared understanding of what both partners need in order to move forward. This might mean scheduling regular check-ins, working with a counselor or coach, or setting aside time each week to evaluate progress. Action means leaning into the discomfort instead of running from it. Another aspect of action is consistency in behavior. If someone has betrayed trust, they can't just say, "I'm different now," and expect belief. They have to prove it daily. That might involve being transparent about where they are, keeping small promises, or eliminating triggers that contributed to the betrayal. For the betrayed partner, action may involve working on personal healing, whether through journaling, therapy, or self-care practices that strengthen emotional resilience. Both partners must invest energy into creating new patterns. Without these actions, trust remains theoretical instead of lived. It's also worth noting that action often means making hard choices. Sometimes the action needed to heal isn't to stay in the relationship, but to leave it. If the betrayer refuses to change, healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it means protecting yourself from further harm. For the betrayer, action may mean cutting off toxic influences, changing environments, or removing temptations that led to betrayal. These choices are rarely easy, but they signal seriousness about repairing the damage. Without sacrifice, words of commitment are hollow. Action also involves creating new experiences that reinforce the possibility of safety and closeness again. This doesn't mean ignoring the past or pretending everything is fine. It means deliberately building moments that remind both partners why they're fighting for the relationship. That could look like planning quality time together, reestablishing shared routines, or engaging in activities that bring joy and connection. Positive shared experiences are deposits in the trust bank, and they can't be created by time alone. They require initiative and planning. For healing to be real, it also requires action toward forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't automatic, nor is it simply waiting until anger passes. It is an active process of deciding how to release resentment while still holding the betrayer accountable. This may involve repeated conversations, revisiting boundaries, or working through emotions in therapy. Forgiveness is a verb, not a feeling. It's something you practice, not something that magically arrives with the calendar. Healing also demands emotional action, choosing vulnerability instead of building walls, choosing openness instead of withdrawal. After betrayal, it's natural for the betrayed partner to shut down to protect themselves. But healing requires slowly reopening, testing trust, and allowing intimacy to return little by little. This process isn't passive, it's active courage. And for the betrayer, it means showing up with patience, accepting rejection without defensiveness, and consistently proving they are safe to lean on. Finally, action means measuring progress and adjusting along the way. Healing is not linear. There will be setbacks, triggers, and difficult days. What matters is not avoiding these struggles, but responding to them constructively. Maybe a new boundary needs to be created, or maybe an old wound resurfaces and requires fresh conversation. Active healing means treating these moments as opportunities for growth rather than signs of failure. Time doesn't provide this, deliberate effort does. At the core, healing after betrayal is about rebuilding trust brick by brick. Time may give you the opportunity to lay those bricks, but the building won't happen unless you pick them up and put them in place through consistent, intentional action. Whether that's showing up with honesty, keeping commitments, or addressing wounds through real conversation, the work has to be done. Waiting and hoping is not enough. Healing belongs to those who take responsibility, who act with integrity, and who stay committed to the process no matter how long it takes. Time doesn't heal betrayal. People do, through their actions.